Section 3B. Why are you doing this? That was the question my girlfriend of 3 years, Myra, asked me repeatedly in the days leading up to my departure. The start date for my new trucking gig was looming, and it meant moving to Oregon, a state I'd barely glanced at on a map. I'd be leaving everything familiar behind. I just graduated college, and of course a job was necessary, but it wasn't just about the money. The money was good, admittedly, really good. Which had been why I'd signed the contract in the first place, but the closer my start date got, the more I felt it wasn't the whole reason I was leaving. It was like a weight had settled on my chest back home, a quiet desperation that clung to me even in my sleep. I needed space, a change, something to shake me loose from the inertia that had gripped my life. How did I even begin to explain that feeling? To articulate this growing sense that I couldn't stay, that I wasn't happy there or anywhere really, and that it was slowly suffocating me. And while it was Myra's fault, she wasn't the solution either, no matter how much she wished she could be. I needed to find something for myself on my own. I had to go, I just had to. But yeah, I'm fairly sure what I actually did say was just money. Sue me. I was terrible at expressing my feelings, always had been. You can still call me, she said the night before my flight, her voice tight with unshed tears. We'll talk every day while you're driving, yeah. I don't know, I said hesitantly. I think probably not. There's a whole section in the employee handbook about how I can only use the radio for communication. So they won't know. How are we supposed to do long distance if we can't talk? Her eyes pleaded with me. She was a vibrant, impulsive person, the kind who frequently changed her mind and got spontaneous tattoos, one of the things I loved about her. But her impulsiveness, while endearing, also meant she sometimes struggled to understand boundaries or why I needed space. I remembered the bloodied corpse of the other interviewee skewered to his hood during my training. I remembered the scratch of my own face pressed to the pavement as things scuttled around my rig. How could I explain the chilling fear that had taken root during my brief glimpse into the world of Route 333? How could I make her understand why I needed to follow the phone rule, why even a simple conversation could be a risk? I stayed silent. The silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Her voice got soft, barely a whisper. We're breaking up, aren't we? I think we are. The words felt like a betrayal, a severing of something precious. For a second, I thought Myra might slap me. She wasn't a cruel person, but she was capable of explosive emotions. But instead, she hugged me, clinging to me with a desperation that broke my heart. She kissed me on the cheek, a lingering, bittersweet touch, and then she left. At the door to my apartment, she paused, her face etched with pain. Goodbye, Brendon. In the job preparation packet, my new trucking company was very clear on one thing: read the employee handbook. So I did what anybody would do in this situation. I skimmed it. I'm sure at this point, those of you who read my last post are clucking your tongues disapprovingly. Really, Brendon, one dead body wasn't enough. Didn't you already accidentally break a rule last time? But let me ask you this. What was the last job you worked where you read the entire employee handbook back to front? That's what I thought. It was a thick volume filled with legalese and warnings that seemed ripped from a nightmare. The parts I did read had some seriously weird stuff in them. There was the standard information, what to pack for overnighters, general rig maintenance guidelines, but also some odder things. Sections on what to do if the moon forgot to show up on a night it was supposed to, or explanations on which gas stations were normal and which ones had rules to obey, like don't stare anybody in the eyes, not even if they're speaking directly at you. There was a whole page with a bullet list on which FM radio stations were safe and which might put you into a trance for hours or make you crave non-food substances. Never speed, read a sentence in Section 5A. If you do, it may draw the attention of the highway patrol. They are not highway patrol. They will not give you a ticket. You do not want to find out what they will give you as punishment instead. The handbook spoke of strange phenomena, of realities bending and breaking, of creatures that lurked in the shadows. It felt like a descent into madness, a chilling promise of things to come. Basically, I was around 90–95% sure I would die a morbidly gruesome death my first real time on Route 333, more of a passing interest than an actual fear, which probably just demonstrates how damaged my psyche was. I'm happy to report, however, that my first haul went off without a hitch. I drove through towering redwood groves, then miles and miles of desolate desert punctuated by rundown towns. Finally, the road wound through twisting mountain canyons. I crashed in the sleeper after delivering my haul at a dilapidated warehouse. That's where they told me to leave it. I woke up early the next morning to finish the route and did so alive and well. My truck stopped for a minute and 47 seconds at the same spot as before, but there was no additional visit from those unsettling figures in the forest. Randall, my dispatcher, hadn't seemed overly concerned when I explained what had happened during the interview, so I chose not to be too worried just yet. Back at the truck yard, I dangled my keys in front of Randall. He whistled, a low, appraising sound. 14 hours there and back, that is simply unheard of. Can I ask you what I actually delivered? I ventured. I'd carried a sealed container the entire way, received with little explanation beyond deliver to coordinates. No, you may not. He smiled cheerily and plucked the keys from me, his eyes holding a strange, unsettling glint. I was still having a hard time figuring Randall out. Either he was a passive-aggressive jerk or he simply had an odd sense of humor. Either way, he hadn't seemed too concerned when the other man in my interview had gotten savagely murdered, so that probably tipped the scales towards Jerk. My next few weeks went almost equally smooth, still no incidents in the Redwood section. Randall and the other dispatchers started sending me on longer and longer trips down Route 333. They lasted 3, sometimes 4 days at a time. I didn't mind I was getting massive amounts of overtime, but I did get the odd sense the dispatchers were almost excited about the fact that I was going so far. They seemed particularly pleased when I agreed to take routes further into uncharted territory. I knew there was a part in the employee handbook about how the road would expand over time. A drive that took me 4 hours might take another driver 8 or more. Eventually, there would be a breaking point, a rapid expansion where a section of the road that took you minutes would suddenly require weeks. From snippets of conversations with other drivers, I gleaned the unsettling impression that there were truckers who hadn't quit in time, who'd been stuck on Route 333 for years, endlessly trying to find their way back. Frankly, most days I didn't care much. The initial dread had faded, replaced by a strange indifference. For the first time in years, my racing thoughts were finally slowing. My chronic overthinking was fading away into a sense of pleasant numbness. Whatever happened, however this road worked, it felt distantly relevant, like watching a movie about someone else's life. Before I'd started trucking, I'd been worried that the loneliness would get to me. Now the only thing I worried about anymore was how entirely fine I was being this alone. It was unsettlingly comfortable. I'd stopped for fuel at a petro speed when I heard it. At first, I couldn't quite place the voice, and I just continued filling up the tank. Something nagged at the back of my mind, a thin thread yanking and yanking. Finally, I twisted around to see who it belonged to. Scanning the parking lot, I gaped. It was Myra, my ex-girlfriend, talking animatedly with what looked like one of the petro speed workers. Her bright red hair caught the sunlight, and she was gesturing wildly, looking utterly frantic. As I got closer, I could make out their conversation. "What do you mean there are no mechanics in the area?" Myra jabbed a finger at her car, a small, beat-up hatchback that seemed hopelessly out of place. "How am I supposed to keep driving in that thing?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the nearest town is hours away. You'll have to call a towing company." "I don't want to call a towing company. I want to find somebody here, somebody who can help." "I understand that, ma'am, but—" "Myra." I called out, my voice cracking with surprise. She whirled around, looking as though she was about to snap at me, then her eyes widened in recognition. She sprinted towards me, ignoring the startled look on the petro speed worker's face, and threw herself into my arms. I laughed, a bewildered, disbelieving sound. "This is insane. What are you doing here?" "Looking for you," she exclaimed, her voice breathless. "Looking for Myra? You haven't even called me." "Yes, I did. I've called a dozen times over the last few days and you never picked up. I got worried. I wanted to see you." "I wouldn't have picked up. I was on the 3rd day of a 4-day trip. I hadn't even brought my phone anymore to avoid the temptation of using it." Something like this, her somehow tracking me down to the middle of nowhere, felt exactly like the sort of impulsive thing Myra would do. Entirely insane, but also the reason I'd fallen in love with her. "Amazing luck," she said, pulling back slightly to look me in the eyes. "If my car hadn't died, I wouldn't have stopped here. Can I ride with you?" We talked for hours. It was just like old times. We laughed, we reminisced, we sang along to the limited country songs we knew at ear-shattering volumes. After a few hours, she grabbed my hand and I didn't pull away. I'd thought I was fine with the loneliness, but having her here physically with me, I knew I'd minded more than I'd let myself believe. "I never thought you'd want to talk to me again," I told her, a lump forming in my throat. "At first, I didn't." She stroked my knuckle with her thumb. "I don't think I'll ever stop loving you." I felt amazing, no, better than amazing. I felt happy. I glowed the whole evening, all up until we stopped at a rest stop for the night and she slipped into the building for the bathroom. "Everything's good," I reported on my handheld radio as part of my nightly check-in. Yes, somehow this radio was capable of connecting back with dispatch. I'd given up wondering how. "You sound chipper," Randall said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Crazy story, actually." I told him about running into Myra, about how I was giving her a lift back to civilization and how good it was to see her. He went quiet, a long, unnerving silence stretching between us. "You know you aren't supposed to pick up hitchhikers," he said finally, his voice dangerously low. I didn't. "She's not a hitchhiker, I know her. Did she ask you for a ride?" "No, I offered her a ride, but I hadn't had I would have, but she'd gone to asking first." A slow, deadly chill spread up my back. "Who are you talking to?" Myra climbed into the cab, looking refreshed despite the circumstances. "Nobody, nobody at all." She fell asleep almost instantly, cuddled up next to me. Her warmth was a welcome comfort, but a growing unease gnawed at my insides. This was Myra of all people. I knew her, she wasn't a stranger. I hadn't broken any rules. Why wasn't I allowed to just be happy for once? I forced myself to close my eyes, steady my breaths, and drift off to sleep, desperately trying to push down the rising panic. I woke up hours later. It wasn't a sudden awakening, but a gradual one. Something wet was on my face. I didn't snap my eyes open, instead cracking them open just a fraction, barely enough to see. She was staring at me. In the early morning light, Myra watched me with an enormous grin across her face, fully awake. She leaned in and ran her tongue from my chin up to my forehead. "I love you," she whispered, her voice distorted, unnatural. I sat bolt upright, nearly hitting my head on the cab's ceiling. Everything about her felt wrong. Her skin had a strange, waxy sheen, and her eyes didn't reflect the light. They were flat, black, and lifeless. Myra, I stammered, my voice trembling. She giggled, a high-pitched, unsettling sound. Don't you like it when I show you how much I care? Stop it, I managed to choke out, my heart hammering against my ribs. Stop what? She asked innocently, her smile widening, revealing teeth that seemed just a little too sharp. You're not Myra. Her face contorted, the happy mask dissolving into a grotesque parody of human emotion. Of course I am, darling, who else would I be? I glanced desperately at the rearview mirror, searching for any sign of who or what was actually beside me. It was no use, the reflection showed only Myra's unsettling, distorted face. You're not real, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Oh, but I feel very real to you, she hissed, her voice dropping to a menacing growl. You're just trying to trick me, I said, trying to regain some semblance of control. You think I need to trick you? She chuckled, her breath cold on my neck. You want to be tricked? I slammed on the brakes, sending the truck into a screeching halt. I had to get her out. I had to get away. Get out, I yelled, fumbling with the door lock. She grabbed my arm, her grip like a vice. Don't leave me, Brendon. We were meant to be together. Her nails dug into my skin, leaving angry red welts. Let go of me, I roared, struggling to break free. I finally managed to wrench my arm free and leaped out of the truck, stumbling backward onto the gravel. She scrambled out after me, her movements jerky and unnatural. Her eyes burned into mine, filled with a possessive, terrifying rage. You can't escape me, Brendon, she said, her voice a chilling whisper. I'm always with you. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed in protest. I didn't dare look back, knowing that whatever she was, it was fast, relentless, and determined to have me. I plunged into the dense woods surrounding the highway, stumbling over roots and branches, desperate to lose myself in the labyrinthine wilderness. Stop it, she growled the fourth time we stopped, her strides matching mine, her breath warm on my neck, her face distorted into a grotesque mask, then softened back into a smile. I'll miss you. I took the keys with me when I went to fill up the tank. She pressed her face up against the glass the whole time, smiling down at me, waving incessantly. When I climbed back in, she giggled. Don't take so long, she said. I missed you. I knew I was going to die. I kept running until I saw the faint glimmer of headlights in the distance. It was a rest stop, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. I burst onto the asphalt, gasping for air, and sprinted towards the brightly lit building, praying that anyone could help me. The woman behind the counter looked at me with a weary expression. You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. Please, I stammered. I need help. There's a woman. She's not who she seems. Slow down, the clerk said soothingly, handing me a bottle of water. Take a deep breath and tell me what happened. I recounted the story, stumbling over my words, desperately trying to make sense of the terrifying events that had unfolded. The clerk listened patiently, her expression growing increasingly concerned. You say this woman, she wasn't acting right? She asked when I finished. She wasn't human, I whispered, shaking my head. I don't know what she was, but she was Myra. The clerk nodded slowly. You should probably get some rest. You're clearly shaken up. She handed me a key to a small, dingy motel room attached to the rest stop. Room number 7, it's the best I can offer right now. I thanked her gratefully and stumbled towards the room, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. I locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the bed, staring blankly at the cracked ceiling. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what had just happened. Was it a hallucination, a nightmare, or was it something far more sinister? I tried to call Myra, the real Myra, but my phone had no signal. I was completely cut off from the outside world. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see her standing there watching me, but the parking lot was empty, bathed in the eerie glow of the streetlights. I managed to get a few hours of fitful sleep, plagued by nightmares of Myra's distorted face and her chilling whispers. When I woke up, I felt no better. I was still exhausted, terrified, and utterly alone. I showered, hoping to wash away the lingering feeling of dread, but it was no use. The feeling persisted, clinging to me like a shroud. I dressed in the clothes I'd been wearing for the past 3 days, clothes that now smelled of sweat and fear, and went back to the rest stop. The clerk was there, wiping down the counter. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern. Sleep well, she asked. Not really, I admitted. I still can't shake this feeling that I'm being watched, she sighed. This is a lonely stretch of highway, honey. It plays tricks on your mind. I forced a weak smile. Yeah, maybe you're right. I bought a cup of coffee and sat down at a booth, staring out the window. As I sipped the lukewarm brew, I noticed something odd. Across the parking lot, in the shadow of a semi-truck, a figure was standing. It was a woman. My blood ran cold. I slowly lowered my coffee cup, my hand trembling. I couldn't make out her face in the shadows, but something about her posture, her stillness, was eerily familiar. I stared, frozen in place, my heart pounding in my chest. And then she stepped into the light. It was Myra, but it wasn't the Myra I knew. It was the Myra from the rest stop, the one with the vacant eyes and the unsettling smile. Her face was contorted into a grotesque parody of happiness, and her lips were parted in a silent, chilling laugh. She raised her hand and waved. And as I stared into those empty, lifeless eyes, I understood. The road wasn't just expanding, it was changing people. It was taking their memories, their identities, and replacing them with something else, something dark, something sinister, something that wanted to be loved. And that something was now looking at me, and it wanted me to come with it. I was a trucker on a highway that didn't exist, and I'd just picked up the wrong hitchhiker.